Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. And on the line now, I have Dowson. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yep, you got it.
All right, well, I have Dowson from OnX Hunt, and we're going to get a little bit talking into scouting, online scouting, and how OnX Hunt can potentially help you for this upcoming fall and any other hunting season. So, Dylan, what's going on today?
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having us on. Today playing a little bit of catch up here in the office. We're getting a bunch of stuff ready for the fall. So theoretically, if everything goes well, when fall comes, I can just press the go button and then get out and do some hunting myself. But we're gearing up for the fall and itching for hunting season for sure.
Awesome. So where's OnX Hunt is in Missoula, Montana, correct?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So OnX was founded in Missoula. We do have an office in Bozeman, Montana as well, about 3 hours down the road. Recently in Missoula, we just upgraded. We outgrew our old office, so we bought some land right next door, built another one. So we're kind of in the transition period. Most people are moved over and kind of getting settled in, but we're growing super fast. So I wouldn't call it growing pains because everything is, gone pretty smooth, but growing pretty rapidly. So kind of getting in the mix here with the new building here in Missoula.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. But so OnX has really kind of jumped into the mainstream here in the last few years, but that hasn't always been the case. It's not a very new company, right?
So not relatively, I guess. OnX was started in 2009. Eric Siegfried, our founder, still with the company. He started it. He grew up in eastern Montana, right down the road from where I grew up, and grew up over there, did a little bit of guiding, and then when he came over to the western end of Montana, which is where Missoula is located, basically, in a nutshell, he was having some issues trying to find areas to get out and go hunt, not being familiar with the area. And so essentially he found all the data, put it on a micro SD card, and then made that available to work in a Garmin GPS unit so he could see where the private public land was in relation to where he was at on the map. And so he kind of just solved a problem, that he was having personally with moving and not being familiar with an area and not, wanting to waste precious time studying where he could go instead of being out there. So he basically solved that problem for himself and realized it was a great tool that a lot of people needed to see. So started in 2009, and then a few years later is when we started working on the Hunt app.
Okay. So my experience with OnX, I think it was somewhere in the 2011, 2012 period when I bought the first chip. So I bought a chip for Pennsylvania and for my Garmin GPS unit, and have been using that ever since, and it's been awesome. And I eventually ended up buying Ohio's chip as well as Colorado when I started going out there a few years ago, and it's been awesome for me to be able to use that. I bought it specifically for the landowner maps because I was going to different areas, starting to scout new places, and that was kind of the basis, it seems like anyways, of what OnX was trying to accomplish from the beginning, but it definitely evolved from there. So explain a little bit more about I guess the chips and the app as far as what exactly is it?
Yeah, so the chip, is the product that OnX started on. So definitely an important core product. I think I was about the same as you. So I've been at OnX personally about 3 years now. I think I got my first chip when I think it was about 2011 as well. And basically I got it, as a Christmas gift, I think it was. And really all I was doing was hunting areas where I grew up in eastern Montana, areas that I kind of grew up hunting, and I thought I knew every little nook and cranny and who owned what and where the public was and where I could hunt, where I couldn't. And immediately when I got the chip and a Garmin GPS, I was driving by places out to my hunting spot, and I would drive by a piece of state or BLM land that I had no idea was there, wasn't marked or wasn't even fenced. That previous years I've seen some pretty good deer on and just kind of assumed that it was private. So initially when I got it too, it was an eye opener, and that's primarily why I think everybody gets it or I shouldn't say everybody, the majority of the people get it to be able to see who owns the private property in the public land. But as you stated, there's so much more than that now. But in a nutshell, what the chip is state by state. And so like Montana here, if I plug in a Montana chip to my Garmin GPS, it's going to show me all the private boundaries, who owns that private property. It'll come up with their name. If it's public, it will be color coded. So like blue will be state, green will be forest, yellow BLM, etc. So you can quickly see what it is along with all those boundaries and whatnot. It'll have other, basic information like the 24K topo on it, so you can see elevation gain loss, streams, roads, creeks, trails, all that good stuff as well. And that's essentially what the chip is. It works either in a Garmin or you can plug it into a computer and check it out there. But basically, in the past couple of years, the technology has gotten so much better with phones and the GPS capabilities of the phones that we've really been diving hard into the phone app, the Hunt app. And what that does is it gives you all that same data that's on the chip, the private, public lands, topo. You can get aerial imagery on the chip or on the app, It basically turns your smartphone into a handheld GPS device that works offline. You can save maps for offline use, and it really lets you customize the data, what you want to see or not see at any given point. You can customize the map on your phone. So essentially what the Hunt app does is it gives you all that data, turns your phone or tablet into a GPS that really you can rely on with or without service, and no matter where you're hunting at.
Yeah, and so I was using that chip for a while. I guess it was 6 years or so. And then last year, I was introduced to the app. So, I was a little bit late to the game to do that. But even then, I was really not sure about jumping over to it. I was like, what about my phone battery? What if I don't have service? All these things were going through my head. And I'm like, I'm just going to, keep using my GPS and, fiddle around with the app on the side. But it didn't take long to figure out that there's all those issues that I thought I had in my head were easy to get rid of. So, for example, the Hunt app has the feature where you can for offline use, so you can download the map area ahead of time and for an area you're going into and use it with no cell signal. And you can run that without as long as you're not tracking yourself, you're not using a whole lot of battery. So you can mark waypoints, you can use the aerial photographs and the topographic maps or the overlay that you guys have to be able to do that. And that was a huge transition for me. But I have to say, not until even after my Colorado trip last September was it that I fully switched over to relying on the phone. And it's been awesome because I don't need to carry both of those things. And as far as the battery issue that I was worried about with my phone dying, I just paired up basically with one of those dark energy chargers, and with one full charge in that dark energy, my phone will last a full 7 days in the backcountry without worrying about it dying completely. I always have a way of backing it up, and that's with me using it for other things, not just that. So that was a big thing for me.
That's a good point, because that's one that we hear constantly. And I was the same as you. Even when I started working here at OnX like 3 years ago, The app was progressing, and to be honest with you, we kind of had to wait for a few things technologically to catch up to make it where we wanted it to be and where it is today. But I would say for my personal use, when I'm out hunting 3 years ago, when I started working at OnX, I was relying more heavily on my chip and my Garmin than I was the app. And so about a year ago now, we completely rebuilt the app from the ground up to make a ton of improvements, really improve on the save maps for offline use feature. And since we've done that, I haven't turned on a Garmin GPS. So that's 100% what I rely on when I'm out there, is the phone app, and it has been great. But yeah, it's in the last 3 years that I've been here, and since the app started, it's came leaps and bounds of where it was, and it's much more reliable now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to see. And like you said, anything that you can do to cut weight or just not have to remember another thing, you always have your phone on you. So it's pretty nice to be able to have that feature, built right into it. And actually, before we keep going with this, Dylan, I apologize, but I forgot to kind of ask you a little bit about yourself and what you do with OnX.
Yeah. So as I said, I've been here about 3 years. I actually started out in customer service, and really, that was the perfect spot for me to start here. It forced me to really kind of dive into the minds of our customers, and talk to them on the phone or through email pretty much all day for over a year, and really understand who our customer is throughout the country. And I grew up in Montana. I live in Montana now. I've never lived in any other state. So to be able to talk to people all throughout the country and see how they use the product and what they need out of it and what their requests are, was really a good spot for me. And so currently, a little while ago, I can't remember exactly how long, but switched over to the marketing team. And so my current job title is community coordinator. I work a lot with our pro staff team, our influencers throughout the country. I do a lot of the trade shows and events, as well as work a lot with social media here at OnX. So on the product side of the marketing team now, but I've seen a few different spots here and been fortunate enough to wear a few different hats here at OnX so far.
That's cool. So you said personally you grew up in Montana, have just lived there ever since. And I'm sure you understand how lucky you are with being able to hunt all the different species and just the opportunities that are available over there.
Yeah, I think I understand that more so now than I think I ever have. More just from these conversations and whatnot. And growing up here, that's what I grew up doing. So I wouldn't say I taken it for granted, but sometimes I forgot that what I get to do every year and the amount of days I get to spend in the field and different species I get to go hunt and whatnot is kind of rare, especially when you think of it nationwide. So it's good for me to have conversations like these, with people in different parts of the country that, aspire to come out to Montana or Colorado or Wyoming and hunt deer, elk, antelope, bear, all sorts of different stuff, and have the opportunity to put in for moose, sheep, and goat every year, and bison. And it's a great place to live. I love Montana. But yeah, I think I remind myself of that more now than I ever have.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So where I come from is north central Pennsylvania, and I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere with no matter where you went, it was public land available to hunt for the most part. And whether that was timber property or nationally owned or state land. And once I moved down towards the Pittsburgh area for work, I couldn't believe, well, that's when I really realized how lucky I was to grow up in an area where you can hunt anywhere. When I came here and it's like, I got to figure, I could ask permission to hunt somewhere, or I have to drive, 45 minutes to find a chunk of game lands that's that seems to have a lot more hunters in a small area. And it was just something that was eye-opening to me, and I appreciate everything that I grew up with so much more now that I moved away for a little while to go back. But as far as Montana goes, I've never been to Montana, but it's one of those places that I feel like I could definitely live.
Yeah, I let's put it this way: I really don't have any plans of ever moving out of Montana. So it's treated me pretty well so far.
No, I don't blame you there, man. That's awesome. It seems like, and especially the area you're in. Again, this is just from me looking at maps because I've never been there and photos, but it looks like just such a beautiful area.
Yeah, it really is. And so, I mean, eastern Montana, where I grew up, versus where we're at here in Missoula, it's almost like two different like continents. It's not even like the same state. Eastern Montana is more rolling hills, plains, badlands. There are some elk over there, but it's more so deer hunting, antelope, upland bird hunting. And then on the western side here, it's rugged, steep mountains, good elk population. And really the main difference is eastern Montana, there is public land and there's a lot of it, but it's very checkerboardy and very, it might be like a quarter section here and a section down the road. It's not like, for the most part, besides a few places, it's not like you can just, throw a pack on and hike all day in one direction and not have to deal with private. And in the West, that's absolutely how it is. Over here in Missoula, there's a ton of public land, a lot of forest, some timber company land that we're fortunate enough to be able to hunt. And really, I mean, in the mountains, for the most part, you can hike in one direction for a very, very long time and not run into any civilization or private. So even the move, in the state, and it's about an 8-hour difference here in Montana, it was quite a big change for me. I grew up hunting a lot of, not a lot, but I grew up hunting some private ground where my friends had farms and ranches, and we family had a farm, so we grew up hunting that. And now I only hunt public land over here in western Montana. So it was something that, it was easy working for OnX to be able to find spots with the maps, but otherwise it would have been kind of tough to make that move and not really be confident enough to move in August and, mid-August find hunting spots already.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. You're exactly right. And going to a different place like that, and I'm assuming it's similar to like, so when I would drive through, the first time I was going to Colorado and I drove through the eastern part of the state, and I was like, where are the mountains? It's nothing but, it looked like Kansas the whole way across. And then all of a sudden you get into the western part of the state, and it was just crazy, such the difference in one state there. And from the movie there, that John Denver's full of shit is what I was saying, as we were driving out there. But
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's how Montana is. I would say for half, if not a little bit more than half to 3/4 of the state is flat rolling hills and whatnot, and a lot of sagebrush. And then all of a sudden you hit the mountains and you're like, oh, we're in the mountains now.
Yeah, we're getting serious now.
Yep. Yeah, my cardio's had to change quite a bit from hunting growing up versus over here. It's taken me a while to keep up with the local guys from western Montana for sure.
Oh, I'm sure of that. That was an eye opener for me. As soon as you go from 1,500 feet above sea level to 10,000-11,000 feet, and even higher than that, it was just like, and throw away the elevation, just look at the terrain differences. It was amazing, the difference there, and realizing that everything I did, I might as well throw it out the window because I need to work a little harder at it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's good. But you were talking a little bit there about checkerboard areas. What do you mean by that?
So checkerboard, a lot of it. So each state is different. I don't want to speak on every state because I'm not 100% sure on the laws in other states. But Montana, for example, you're not legally supposed to corner cross, you call it. So if there's 4 pieces in Montana, we go township section range. So for the most part, typically like one section of land would be like a mile by mile. And so say there's 4 of those together, and the section in the northwest corner is private, and the section in the southeast corner is private, so kitty corner, and the other 2 are public. You're not legally supposed to cross from public to public in that spot, even though they do kind of touch each other. But if they're on opposite ends, if the corner is the only one that's touching each other, you can't access that because the other 2 are private. And in eastern Montana, we kind of refer to it as checkerboard, just like on, a checkerboard to be black and red or whatever, 2 colors, with private and public land. So there might be, 15, 20 sections of BLM land that technically you can hunt if you have access to it. But if only one of those sections, if a road only goes through one of those sections, you can only access that section because you can't corner cross to all of the other ones, because it's technically surrounded by private. So it's, it's one of those things here in Montana where we've got a ton of public land. We're super, super lucky, but we also have a ton of public land that we cannot access because a public road, does not intersect that, and we can't corner cross. So that's kind of what I meant by that.
Okay.
And you really just have to know where you're at all times, because a lot of the places over there aren't even fenced, or labeled whether it's private or public. So, looking at a paper map, you can still see all that if you bought a current up-to-date paper map and update those every year. So you can still see those, but you can't see exactly where on the map you are. So you can speculate and look at, topo lines and be like, hey, I'm probably here. But if you took, if you walk that next 10 yards, you could be on private and not even know it. So that's why, the Hunt app is extremely valuable for that stuff, is you can look and see exactly where on the map your location is. And, I can walk up and I can hunt, feet from a property boundary, even if that's not marked or fenced whatsoever, and still be legal.
Okay. I gotcha. And that's where the app is such a big, I guess it's a great feature to be able to allow you to hunt some of those areas that you may have strayed away from because you're like, I don't know where the boundaries are. I don't want to mess around with it. And now you're more confident. And also if it came down to it and you had some sort of a confrontation or someone came up to you and said, hey, this is private land, you can be confident in saying that it is or isn't.
Yeah, for sure. And we hear those cases all the time. We've heard, farmers and ranchers getting the app or being told by somebody that had the app, and they found out they had an extra 5 acres or whatever it is that they didn't even know about, stuff like that. So we hear those cases all the time. And I personally been in those cases last year. Buddy that I work with at the office here, Zach, and I were archery antelope hunting in Montana in a spot that we had never really hunted before, and came around the corner and there's a pretty nice buck out there. So I put a stalk on him, and there was no fences, no nothing. And there's like a little strip of BLM where we could access a bigger chunk. So went out there, kind of blew the stalk, unfortunately. But when we were coming back, I noticed there was a Fish and Wildlife officer parked behind my pickup, and we had been tracking ourselves the whole way. So we had the tracking feature turned on in the app, so you could see exactly where we've been. And it's a spot that without that, A, we wouldn't have known it was public, and B, there's no way that I would have tried to, go through this little strip of BLM that wasn't marked, in fear of crossing onto private property. But anyways, long story short, we went up, came back. The game warden asked if we knew, where we were at, where the boundaries were, showed him the app, showed him exactly where we had walked through that strip of BLM public land. And he's like, great, I use the product too. It's awesome.
Wow. That's cool to hear that. And that's not an issue like that we see as much in the East, but definitely something like going to one of those Western states that you could need to really have in the back of your mind. You already have enough challenges from going out there, coming from back East, you don't need something else to worry about as far as where you're allowed to go or anything along those lines. You want to have 100% confidence in what you're doing and being able to proceed with that. So that's definitely a big deal, being able to do that. So kind of from the eastern side of things, so in the Appalachian region, some of the places that I've hunted where that's really helped me out was being able to find areas that were, say, owned by a timber company or owned by a gas company, whatever it may be, any sort of business even, and being able to either look up on their website whether they have public hunting access or be able to just give them a call and get a written permission to be able to access these properties. And so that's where I think that feature has been awesome from the standpoint of whitetail hunting in different places, especially when I started traveling to Ohio, where Ohio, their trespassing laws are very, very strict. I mean, if you trespass once, you're getting, whether it's intentional or not, you go right to jail. And they do not do a very good job of labeling, what's posted property and what's not. And being able to have that app has been awesome for me because I'm able to, in certain areas that might have a thin strip of public that may only be a couple hundred yards wide, but accesses, the back end of a giant area that may take a lot longer to walk into from another access, you're able to get back in there quicker, silently, and a little bit more efficient without blowing out deer. So that's been a huge feature for me.
Yeah, and that's a good point because, I mean, for me too, personally, I use it just as much for strategy of how I'm going to do a hunt than I do finding places to hunt. So, initially I think a lot of people get the app and even the chip to see where they can and can't hunt. And that's, primarily what the product was designed for. But at the same time, if I'm spring bear season just closed here in Montana recently, and there's so many times that, I'll spot a bear from a mile or two away, zoom in on my aerial imagery, mark a waypoint in the park that I saw the bear in, because by the time I get around to the other side of the canyon, you're sitting there in the trees. You have no idea where that park is. You don't know if you're 20 yards from the bear or 2,000, it's almost impossible to do that. So the more and more that I'm using it, it's a lot more strategy of, like you said, how to access a particular stand or a particular piece that you want to hunt better. So yeah, not only are people using it to find where they can and can't go, but also the strategy side and really to help you be more successful. I use it a ton for. Yeah.
So speaking of that, you can use the online tool as well that links right to your app, correct?
Yeah. So when you get the membership on your phone, you can use it on your phone, tablet, and also computers. All you have to do is go to our website on the computer, just www.onxmaps.com. In the upper right now, we have like a login or start mapping, and then it pulls up your same account. So if I've marked, 20, 50, 100 waypoints on my phone or a tablet, those automatically show up on the computer and vice versa. So a lot of the times if I'm like planning, if I were to go out this next weekend and go scout out an area, I'd probably start with the computer version because it's a lot easier to see a bigger screen and really come up with a game plan, and mark waypoints of where I wanted to camp, some trailheads I wanted to check out, mark some routes, into an area where I might be able to zoom in and find some water sources, etc. And then when I get out there, after I've saved it on my phone, all that data that I've compiled right on the computer automatically shows up right on my phone. So instead of looking around trying to figure out what the best plan of attack is, I've already done that part. So when I get out there, I can just hit the ground running. Yeah.
So it's funny the way when the first trip I took out to Colorado, I was still using the chip, and I was using where I could overlay it on to Google Earth at the time. Yeah. And I was doing that, which was an extremely, effective way of doing things to mark waypoints ahead, it was just it was a little bit cumbersome to go through and then transfer that to, to the GPS and then make sure that everything downloaded. But once I started using the online version that links right to your phone, I mean, as soon as I had the waypoints and exited out of the browser, they were on my phone. I was ready to go. And so what I would do is how I would scout an area for elk. Okay, so I'd pull up an area. This is where I want to go in and hunt. I would mark where I thought potential bedding was, where I thought the water source, the food sources, and would have all of those marked. So when I went in there, I had those points of interest to be able to go to. And the best part was when you're going through, and the situation was unfortunate, but it worked, is I went to this one bedding area, I blew out a ton of elk, and it ended up being like right where I had the waypoint marked from, 2,000 miles away. And that's a pretty cool feature to be able to do that. My fault for blowing them out, but the fact that I was able to find them was pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's just it, especially if you're traveling to a different state or whatever, and a lot of people have very limited time. The last thing you want to do if you have a week vacation to go to a new state or even to the same state you've always hunted and to get it done is waste time doing stuff like driving around, figuring out where you can access and where you can't. Time is valuable, and especially when you only get X amount of days per season every year, and it's pretty nice to be able to just hit the ground running and try and go make it happen instead of sit there in a vehicle trying to come up with a strategy.
Yeah. No, that's awesome to be able to do that. And the big thing is having backup areas. I have basically 5 areas at any time when I go in to one larger area and for backup. So if I don't find elk or if I don't find deer in that area in a few days, I can move on and not be pulling out the maps being like, oh shit, what's the next, what am I going to do now? And spend time trying to figure that out. You can mark everything online, put them on your phone, have your maps downloaded, and be able to bounce from area to area in a relatively short amount of time.
For sure. And personally, I do it the other way around as well, just as much. I'll go into an area, and I'm still, I'm relatively new to the area over here and still trying to find some spots where I can really find elk consistently and figure out what they're doing and where they travel and why, and, the whole big picture. And when I'm out there, I'll mark waypoints and put notes in there. So like if I find a elk wallow, I'll mark it and I'll put notes of like, was there a good trail into it? Which way was it coming, etc. And then, bedding areas, all that good stuff. And then when I get back from a weekend hunt or scout, I can pull those up on the computer, look at it as a bigger screen, and really visually between the topo maps and imagery, kind of, paint a bigger picture of, okay, what is that elk herd doing and why? And for the most part, it's going to be fairly consistent year to year, I feel, unless fire comes in or really bad hunting pressure or wolves. But, I do it the other way as well, and it's really helped me to kind of paint a bigger picture and figure out kind of how that elk herd moves through a basin or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's true. And after I, visited the areas and did that, I have a decent amount of waypoints, and I do what you do. I don't just, mark the spot. I put details in the description of, okay, it's an elk wall. I might even though it marks the date, I may write the date, on there, knowing it was, was it tore up? Was it used recently? So then, year by year, okay, at least I know at this time that this was tore up, and maybe that'll be the case next year. And also if I, jump some bedded elk, I'll mark that down. So that's also something that I, pay attention to there.
Yeah, for sure. And, like you're kind of alluding to, and you might not be able to figure that out by 1 year's worth of data, but if you keep hunting that and you come across the same wallow and put a note in for every year of, its use or whatever, that might be the one thing that the following year, the 3rd, 4th, or 5th year you go to that area, you might be able to compile enough information that you have a good feeling about sitting that wallow a particular night because of whatever reason it is, and you might be successful. So yeah, it's a good, data management tool as well, because you can mark those waypoints and tracks and put notes in there. I've created a lot of tracks, especially here in the mountains, and going into different areas kind of went into them differently based on looking at topo. And there's several tracks that I've, hiked up into a spot, and there's no way I would ever choose that way again, whether it be like deadfall or creek crossing or whatever it is. So even for places to get into places I want to hunt, I'll find the best one and save that track. And that way, if I come back a year later in the dark, I know exactly where to park. I know exactly where to hike up. I'm going to follow, even in the dark, I'm going to follow my phone. Because there are a lot of spots over here where you can get clipped out. You can come up on a 300-yard log jam, blow down from a fire where you're crossing logs for, 2 hours to get not very far at all. So yeah, I found that to be super valuable for me as well, just finding good routes into hunting areas.
Yeah, that's a huge one that I realized. I was hunting in a wilderness area, so there's no logging or anything going on. There's just deadfall everywhere, it seems like, and every place that I thought was a shortcut was not a shortcut when she started getting into some of that deadfall. And yeah, I have that marked with basically a big X, like, stay out of there. As far as if you're trying to take a shortcut, or like you said, navigating in the dark. And the same thing with the cliffs. It's something that may show up on a topo map you don't realize until you actually get there and see it. You can get cliffed out pretty easily in different areas.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, I've had several times where in the dark I fight through some nasty stuff in a flashlight, only to see that in the daylight and just shake my head, because if I would have only been 20 yards, north, I could have just walked on a trail.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of trial and error. But that's primarily use case for Western hunting, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, in the East, a lot of guys are marking the very best route or multiple different routes based on what the wind's doing into their tree stands. So they might hunt the same tree stand, but come into it a different way and keep those tracks so they can get there at, hour before daylight or whatever, and just head up there and not have to fumble around and, leave a bunch more scent in the area or make a bunch more noise than what they'd have to.
Yeah, especially in the East when you're whitetail hunting, that's a big deal. And getting to your stand quietly and not making a bunch of noise and disturbing a lot of stuff is one of the biggest things. And for me anyways, when I'm hunting some of the regions, especially when it's really, forested terrain, you're not walking through an open farm field, you have to find the best route. So when I'm in there in the spring doing my scouting and everything, that's when I'm marking routes, walking in, going through, and whether that's doing a track and saving it, or that's just putting visual markers down, almost like so if you would use, I don't know if you guys use them out there, but we use tree tacks sometimes in places that you're allowed to, or like twisty reflective tape that go around branches. So when you're walking in with a flashlight, you can find your way to your tree stand. But anymore, so I don't want other people finding the way to my tree stand, I can just have little, I just leave waypoints every, say 100 yards going through, and I'm able to follow those along, whether that's on an old logging trail or a gated road or whatever that may be, and figure out where I need to cut in to head up to my stand. And that's been a great feature to be able to use there as well. So
yeah,
within that app, there's a bunch of different map layers. So coming from on the eastern side of things, the biggest thing is for me is seeing timber cuts. I turn that feature on all the time, and the reason for that is that's the big woods food plot for me. Is when you find a timber cut that's a few years old and it's just starting to green up, grow up a little bit and everything, and they're feeding on that browse. I'll look at that, and the nice feature is on federally owned land, they have all this marked, and with the year, when the year it was cut. And you can tell if it was completely clear-cutted or if it was select cut. And if you know how to use that tool and that feature right there, it is extremely beneficial to you. So if I see one that say it was cut in 2008, I'm going to know that's a little bit more grown up now, and it's probably going to create a great bedding area. But if I see one that's relatively new, 2 to 3 years old, then I'm going to focus on more of that for food. And they may still bed in there too if there's some, blackberry bushes or briars, anything underneath. But that's how I'm using that to aerial scout areas and then go in and confirm it on, with boots on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a big one. And then another one that's kind of basically the exact same reason to use it, as you just mentioned, was the historic wildfires. So we do compile all the data for wildfires, where exactly the parameters was. It'll show you by color code the exact spots that the fire burned with the year that it burnt. And I mean, exact same reason that you're using the timber cuts there. The wildfire one is super, super helpful. I mean, yeah, the amount of layers and the amount of data in the app really sets it apart from the chip. I know we were talking about the differences a little bit, and we're able to incorporate so much more data into the app, and you can customize it and turn it on and turn it off. Like, some people may never ever use a historic wildfire or the timber cuts layer, so they don't want that, on their map and kind of taking away from the stuff they do use. And that's the nice thing about the app, is you can choose what you want to see and what you don't. So there's a ton of different information and different layers in there that you can use, where you want and when you want, and change the transparency and the look and feel to it. So that is a big difference between the app and the chip. If we were to, include all of this data on the chip, there'd be so much information on the map that it would be hard to pick out and use the information that you wanted.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And like, I don't need the wildfire app on while I'm hunting in Pennsylvania or Ohio or New York. But if I'm hunting in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, name the state out there, you want to have that turned on, or at least have it on for scouting as well, to be able to look at that and see, was the wildfire long enough ago where it could be a food source, or is this an area I want to avoid hunting for a year or two? Is that kind of how you're using it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's got their own kind of preference. I would say every single person uses the app differently. Everybody hunts a little bit differently and uses the data differently. Some people strictly rely on private and public land and, look at the imagery and topo, and that's it. A lot of people are relying on like our roadless areas layer. It'll show areas farthest away from roads, and people are planning trips based on that information right there. They want to hike into an area in the backcountry, in the wilderness, wherever it is, not see people, or at least not be bothered by cars and ATVs and dirt bikes, and they can use that layer. As you said, the timber cuts, historic wildfires, we have a current wildfire layer that's updated daily. Not wildfire season currently, but here in Montana, I mean, typically toward the end of the summer and once archery season starts, we're usually covered in smoke and lots of fires. And so daily you can track that and see where the fires are at. Even for safety reasons, one of my areas last year was on fire, and it was small enough that it was fine. I could still go hunt that area. I checked it the next day, and that fire just completely blew up overnight. So instead of driving 2 hours down there, realizing that the air was so smoky I wouldn't be able to even see anything and deal with that hazard, I was able to see that from my couch on my phone and go to plan B and go to a different area. So that one, we've got wilderness, we've got trails and wreck sites, we've got trail slope, trail mileage. I mean, the layers, there's a lot of information. We work with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, National Wild Turkey Records. We work with Boone and Crockett, a few other organizations that we take some of their data and incorporate it into a layer that will show people their data as well. So there's lots of different options for sure.
Yeah, you guys have been very busy in the last couple of years updating that, like you were saying. Is there anything else that you could tell me about new that we may be looking forward to here in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, we have so many things on the roadmap, and we've got a great team here that is growing, at a very fast rate. I think I don't know exactly where we're at. We've hired a bunch of people even this week, but I think we are, I want to say, over 90 employees right now, with a big GIS team, big engineering team. So we're always working on the next features, the next information we can put in the app, as well as upkeep and just even the constant year over year updating the information. We recently came out with sharing feature. So, if we're going to meet up in Wyoming somewhere, I can mark a waypoint at the trailhead and text it to you or email it to you, and then all you have to do is click on the link and that waypoint saves in your app. So that's great, and I think there's a lot more that we can do with that feature that we don't have the capabilities quite yet, but we're working towards. So working on some stuff there. We just updated our topo maps, a lot better topo map in there now. We're currently working on aerial imagery. We've got some other stuff coming up that I can't really speak to quite yet, but we're constantly innovating, constantly looking for the next best thing.
Awesome. So whenever I come out to Montana, then you can just email me all the waypoints ahead of time.
Yeah, I'll email you a waypoint where we're going to meet.
Yeah, okay. The gas station, like 3 hours away. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then put on a blindfold and head up. But
okay.
It's that's a cool feature. I mean, me and a guy from work, actually a couple guys from work here, I had a late season cow elk tag, and went in. It was the last day before we were headed to the NWTF convention over in Nashville, and filled my tag with like 3 minutes to spare that night. And by the time we got up to the elk, it was blizzarding, snow. It was horrible conditions. The weather was miserable. But we were like 2.5 miles from the pickup, complete dark, and had this elk down, and it was two of us. And fortunate enough, another buddy of mine was close by, and I had service, so I was able to mark a waypoint and let him know it was successful, had an elk down, and he was able to bring his pack up, hike in 2.5 miles with his headlamp, and get to the exact spot where we were, help us pack it out all in one load. So, I mean, without that, there's no way I would have even tried to have somebody come in and find us. Would have had to take out what we could and either make one more trip and hike all night and get it out, or come back in the morning and hopefully take off some work. So, little things like that I personally used, and I know a lot of people throughout the country have used too. We get a lot of testimonials.
Awesome. No, that's cool to hear. There's a question that I have specifically, and it's actually for personal reasons here, but can you transfer old waypoints from the GPS to the app?
You can. It's definitely a lot. I shouldn't say a lot more. There are more steps to it than it would be to transfer waypoints, from the computer to your app and vice versa. You can do it though. We do have an upload feature on the computer version. And one thing I would say with that too is, if you're not familiar on how to do that, if you go to our website, in our tutorials and support, we've got a ton of really, really great FAQs, instructional videos, step-by-step information, or give our customer service a call. They're great, and they walk people through stuff like that all the time, like step-by-step over the phone. So okay. You definitely can do that, and that's one thing we wanted to make available because, we definitely know and we understand that a lot of people have years and years worth of data and waypoints and very important stuff on their GPSs. So that was important for us to be able to make that transferable and put that into the app.
And can you do that for just, say, an X amount of waypoints rather than all of them? Or
yep,
is it...
absolutely. You can just,
okay.
Yep. No, you can pick and choose for sure.
because I have some whitetail spots that I could definitely use some cleaning up on the waypoints. And because you look at it, and if you're zoomed out about a mile, there's nothing but red. It's just everything I had marked over the last 5-6 years on there, and I need to really go through and clean it up.
Yeah, I just went like last week or the week before and cleaned up a bunch of waypoints. If I didn't have notes with it, or if I didn't, if looking at the waypoint didn't trigger something mentally, I just got rid of it because I had so many. Yeah. That's why I'm really, really trying to be good about putting notes with my waypoints now, so you can look at it later, and even if it's not ringing a bell, you can dive into your notes and figure out why you marked that.
Yeah, and so for what I was using whitetail hunting is I was marking every scrape I'd find, and I realized that you can't do that. It just fills up too much, and so I started switching it up where I'd mark primary scrapes or ones that they're using, year after year, or a big licking branch being broke. Something there was telling me this is something I want to pay attention to, not something that a buck was all riled up during the rut going through, just hitting the branch that day, and pawing up the ground. So that was something that I had to change, that I'm changing going forward. And now what I do is those primary scrapes, I'll just go into that old waypoint when I find it, say the next year, and I see it's tore up, I'll write in the notes, same thing, and then write the date in of the update. And so then when I'm going back looking at it, say whether that's that year I'm using the information or when I'm sitting, at home in the wintertime scouting from my computer, I can pull up that data and be able to say, okay, this scrape is being used 3 years in a row. This time at this time of year, it's being tore up. Then couple that with my trail cam data and be like, all right, if I'm going to, if I think I could use this scrape as a tactic to be successful, these are the dates, these are the conditions that is possible to do that. So there's just endless amount of ways you can use the Scout with it, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to have you on and talk to everyone about that, because no matter where you go in the United States, and again, that's all I've always used it in, is you can use this app for that. So it's very, very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, well before I worked for OnX, I was a big user and believer, and always will be. It's one of those things that we spend a lot of money every year on tags and gas and the equipment and everything to be successful. And to have something readily available to know where you're at and legally use all that stuff that you bought and all that money and time invested shooting your bow throughout the summer and whatnot, it's definitely a very small price to pay to have the confidence to go be successful, or at least put yourself in a situation that you could be successful.
Yeah, awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to add, Dylan, or any more information?
No, I think we covered a little bit of the app. There's a lot of information in there, as we said, and for anybody who doesn't have it or wants to check it out, we do have a free 7-day trial, 100% risk-free. You can just download the app, search OnX Hunt, either in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Set up an account, get free 7 days. If you have any questions, give us a call. We're more than happy to chat with anybody and answer any questions. And then, basically our membership for the app is we've got a premium membership, which is single state, and then elite membership, which is all 50. And the premium membership runs $29.99 a year. The elite $99.99 a year, so $100 gets you all 50 states for the year. So, definitely, I would urge everybody to download it, check it out, even if you want to check it out and play around with the free version and see how it's going to help you out. But it's an awesome tool.
Yeah, awesome. So where can everyone find a little bit more information on OnX, and then as well as you personally?
Yeah, so OnX, our website, www.onxmaps.com/hunt. But if you just go to that onxmaps.com, you'll be able to navigate, see all our videos and whatnot. And then definitely our social media outlets as well for OnX, which is OnX and then the space and Hunt. So we're OnX Hunt on Instagram and Facebook. I would say that's primarily where we're active daily. We'll get back to you, answer any questions through those channels. And then we've got a YouTube for OnX Hunt as well, where we do a lot of videos for, our ambassadors videos and whatnot. And then as well do a lot of like tips and tricks and updates for the app and whatever. So yeah, definitely check those spots out. And then on our website down at the bottom, we've got our support tab if anybody needs any questions or wants anything clarified.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and giving some feedback. I'm sure we'll have to have you on again and talk about some more things as they release and some different ways of using the app. I mean, like you said, we just touched on some of the high-level things here, but I think once people start diving into it, if they haven't used it already, then there's a lot of valuable information here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we'd appreciate hop on again and chat anytime.
All right, man. Well, thank you, and you have a good night.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.